The nervous host looked out as his overnight guest landed on his lawn. The Prince and Princess of Wales were sent to welcome President Trump and the First Lady. "So beautiful, you're so beautiful," the President said. Members of Donald Trump's cabinet looked on, Secretary of State Marco Rubio filming the moment the President was welcomed by the King. Royal carriage processions are at the heart of all state visits, a chance for the public to see the splendour, wave flags and cheer. But this one was conducted in private. Security reasons were cited, but the British state was throwing every bit of soft power it could muster to tame this most unpredictable and volatile of presidents. Hostile crowds could not be risked. Instead, a guard of honour protected him from trees. Only cattle could witness the spectacle. President Trump has an outsized appetite for pomp and military theatre. The government was determined he wouldn't go home hungry. The government said it had laid on more military personnel for this state visit than ever before. The sort of statistic, as they well know, this president savours and often then enhances. The King then led the President into Windsor Castle for lunch. One who's worked with Charles in the past said it was hard to believe he wouldn't take a moment to try to nudge the President's thinking, which on so many areas is poles apart from his own. You worked for the King before he was King. Back then, we might have expected Charles to say something to Donald Trump about drill, baby, drill and other elements of his non-green agenda.
Whether it's going to be about drilling and climate change, or whether it's going to be about, do not allow yourself to be led by the nose by President Putin over Ukraine, I don't know.
But you wouldn't be surprised.
I would not exclude the possibility that there will be some useful and frank conversations between these two great men.
After lunch, the President was shown the royal collection. The political discussions come tomorrow at Chequers, and the government's own national security advisor last weekend revealed in a rare on-camera moment one of the biggest focuses will be trying to get this president to pressurise President Putin with tough sanctions.
President Trump is coming on a state visit to the United Kingdom this week, and certainly one of the subjects that will be very much in the discussion, I think, is how to apply pressure on President Putin. I think there's every sign that President Trump is getting increasingly fed up with Putin messing him around, playing him along and not actually moving forward. And the question is, has he now reached the stage where he's prepared to put that pressure on?
The President said to a cameraman, "Make sure you make me look good." He's proudly shown off albums of his previous meetings with the Queen. Photos were forbidden when he laid a wreath at her tomb in St George's Chapel.
So we have 11 British models. It's very special for us to look after. It's a lot of history. It's a lot of history, yes.
Tomorrow, the government will be hoping it can leverage all this flattering royal access in talks, not least on trade.
The United Kingdom got a better deal than others did when Keir Starmer went to the Oval Office. But it's not yet finished business. There's still more work to be done in that area.
Nailing that down will be a big part of those
we've
talks.
done okay on aerospace, we've done okay on automotive, but there's plenty of other sectors which are affected. And let's not forget, they are all in worse shape than they were before Donald Trump started his tariff wars at the beginning of the year.
The evening will end with a state banquet. The ghost at the feast was projected onto the castle last night. Jeffrey Epstein, once a friend to Donald Trump, as he was to the King's brother, Prince Andrew. And to the man Keir Starmer sacked as ambassador to the US last week, Peter Mandelson. Before that banquet, more bands on the lawn, beating the retreat. Even this president's appetite for the stuff looked sated. At this state visit, the flypast pilots actually got a better view than any of the public. There was a pat on the back for the monarch he calls his friend as the two went back inside. The first 8 hours of the treat's second state visit promised Donald Trump safely delivered. A few more still to go.
And Gary joins me now here at the gates of Windsor Castle. Now, apart from that white van, which is annoyingly in the way, it's been a day of sort of strange absences, hasn't it?
Yes, this is not normal for state visits. We've been talking about how hermetically sealed it was. It was like a movie set state visit. Maybe he can CGI the crowds in later. It's the sort of thing Donald Trump might like to do. And then there was the excess as well that was layered on. It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet of pageantry, and Donald
More
Trump
than
had
usual.
he had his plate sort of piled high. And then the other element in all of this that is pretty unusual, certainly excessive, is the degree to which the trade that is going on here. Pictures for his photo album, the government hopes in return for concessions. I don't think it's a complete accident there's quite so many of his cabinet around here. They're probably slightly worried he's going to go a bit wobbly-kneed after all of this and maybe just give away a bit more than is intended by them. But we do know that America isn't giving away much on steel, for instance. It looks a bit rash for Keir Starmer to have gone around or allowed the message to get out there that we might get steel tariffs down to zero. That's not going to happen by the look of it, and it doesn't look like the quota for free tariffs, the small amount that was going to happen, it doesn't look like that's going to amount to much at all, potentially. We do know that obviously there's some tech investment. We don't really know what the quid pro quo is for that. The tech bosses are going to be in there at that dinner tonight. We do know, I think, that what countries have to select which issues they're going to push on a moment like that Chequers summit tomorrow. And I think they're going to push a lot more on Ukraine, trying to toughen the Trump line on Russia, and probably not go that near the Middle East. One final thing, Keir Starmer. This always mattered to him, this summit. He was told by advisors, don't give him everything at the beginning. Don't give him the second state visit right at the beginning. He said to his advisors, I've got to be all in. I'm not going to look like the sort of guy he really likes. I've got to be all in with this. He went for it. He has had an okay relationship with Donald Trump so far, but boy is he in trouble with his own party. And he needs tomorrow to go smoothly, and preferentially from his point of view, he needs some wins there because things are looking very bad for him.
And tomorrow's a bit of a mindful, isn't it? Gary, thanks very much indeed. Well, joining me now to discuss both sides, we'll be hoping to get out of this visit a Lord Darrach, who was British ambassador to the US during the first Trump presidency, until the leak of diplomatic cables in which he was critical of the Trump administration, and James Rubin, who was a senior State Department official in the Clinton and Biden administrations and is now co-host of the X-Files podcast. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Jamie Rubin, if I may. I mean, we often make fun in this country about the kind of flattery and fealty that we see around the cabinet table in Washington towards Donald Trump. But what we've just dished up here at Windsor Castle is our equivalent to that, isn't it?
Yes, it's extraordinary. I lived in London for some 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The combination of flattery through the royal pomp and circumstance, and then the minimization of any chance of crowds or protests or things like that. But look, it's a very strange thing. President Trump is subject to flattery. He unfortunately thinks that he can do the same with the likes of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. They're not subject to flattery. These are hard men. These are men who grew up in communist regimes or the KGB. But Donald Trump is subject to flattery. Doing these things matters. I think the hard question is the one that Jonathan Powell, the national security advisor to Keir Starmer, raised, is can progress be made on the issue where Donald Trump can make a difference? If Keir Starmer can help persuade him that it's enough already with Vladimir Putin, that it's time to put pressure on Putin, if nothing else, to convince him he can't win on the battlefield, that it's going to be years and years and years more slaughter. And that's the most important issue on the table, really, at this summit, I think.
Right. Kim Darrach, I wonder what actually came up in the privacy of the golden carriage, whether King Charles mentioned any of these things to the president. Maybe he didn't, maybe he kept it to small talk. And of course, Keir Starmer will try and talk to him about these things today, tonight at the banquet and tomorrow. But do you think it'll make any difference? Do you think that Trump will remember and act on whatever he might promise the Prime Minister?
On King Charles, Matt, we're never going to know, are we? But he's a very accomplished diplomat, and he can make his points with subtlety and discretion. So don't rule it out that he has talked about, for example, what's going on in Ukraine, or talked about what's going on in Gaza, because I'm sure there are things he cares about deeply. In terms of how Keir Starmer handles it, look, I don't particularly expect big public breakthroughs in the press conference tomorrow. It's more that you have to keep chipping away on all these points, keep making the arguments, press the president on how he sees things and where he thinks he's going with Putin and how he feels about that, what looks like a totally unsuccessful summit in Alaska, and plant some ideas in his mind. The Europeans have shifted Trump a bit since that disastrous meeting with Zelensky in the Oval Office a few weeks ago. So it's not impossible.
Now, today was very stage managed, the royal pageantry at its smoothest, at its best. Tomorrow, with the press conference, things could get a little bit frothy and unpredictable. What would you be more afraid of if you were still ambassador? Would it be questions about Jeffrey Epstein, which connects the king, the prime minister, and the president, or something about Gaza?
There's a few things, Matt. First of all, I hear the press conference is going to be quite tightly controlled with a specified number of questions for each side. So you're not all going to get around to ask questions, I'm afraid. Second, I'd be a bit worried about Epstein, and the British press certainly, I'm sure some of the Americans, can ask some quite clever, quite loaded questions on Epstein, and who knows what Trump might say. You wouldn't want Trump to be drawn into commenting on whether or not Peter Mandelson should have been fired. And then the other thing that I hope doesn't come up in a bad way in the press conference is this Trump idea that the Europeans now need to put high tariffs on trade with China and Russia in order to put pressure on Putin, alongside the Americans doing that. That's going to be very difficult, contentious, and potentially quite divisive. I mean, we'll try and find a way through in the UK. It'll be very hard for the Continentals. And so that's a split that you can see opening up quite quickly.
James Rubin, let me ask you about Gaza. We know that the British Prime Minister has promised that he will recognize an independent Palestinian state, along with France and Spain and other European countries. And we also know that Donald Trump is very much against that. How much do you think Gaza will become a point of real contention between the Prime Minister and the President tomorrow?
I actually don't think it will be a point of contention, precisely because President Trump and his team were very, very close to a deal to end the war just a couple of weeks ago. And they I believe, and it's my information, that it was very, very close, that an agreement had been struck of how to get the Israeli forces out, how to get Arabs in to control the borders. And then Israel struck Qatar and destroyed that deal. And Donald Trump and the Trump administration were taken aback by that. It wasn't something they wanted to see happen. You combined that anger that really was real. They were not happy about it because it ruined not ruined, but it damaged America's relationship with those allies. Now you have the Israelis going into Gaza City and slaughtering people in real dangerous ways. You can't control that number of people. You can't control those number of forces. So I think Donald Trump and Keir Starmer may actually find themselves more in agreement than usual. And the issue of the Palestinian state recognition is not that big a deal to the United States. It's something the Israelis would prefer to not see happen, but it doesn't affect us.
Right, we've got a bit of a protest going on behind us there. Some disagreements, in fact, some Palestinian flags and the other side represented as well. So this is very much a live issue in British politics and will be one indeed tomorrow. I wonder, Jamie Rubin, if we can turn it around. I mean, we look at the relationship between the powerful president and the rather unpopular, less powerful prime minister. But is the real story of recent months that they're both, in a way, powerless? President Trump on the world stage, because even his best friends aren't listening to him. He allowed the Israelis to bomb Qatar. And, of course, Prime Minister Starmer at home. And that's quite an uneasy relationship.
Well, I think it's a fair point. Look, they're not naturally political allies. There couldn't be more different people, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. A CEO, a guy who says whatever he wants, has managed to be president to the surprise of everyone and loves big pomp and circumstance. And Keir Starmer, much more buttoned up, a very careful man. So they're not natural allies politically or personally. And obviously, neither of them have been able to get good business done on the world stage. Donald Trump says, and I think it's one of his better qualities, that he wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize and tries his hardest, he says, to do what's necessary between India and Pakistan, where he didn't play a role. But now he could play a role in Gaza. He could play a role in Ukraine. And I think together they can cook up ways, for example, to call Vladimir Putin and tell him, we've got new information. It's going to take you 5, 6, 7 years to make any real progress on the ground. Do you really want to do that? And if Putin doesn't respond, then maybe we can finally get that pressure from Donald Trump, which might make a difference. So I think there's a chance for progress because they both, as you say, you know, are not in great shape.
Right. Kim Darroch, let me turn to you again. I mean, in the past, when there were wrinkles between a president and a prime minister, and there have been plenty of those occasions, at the end of the day, like a tongue returning to an aching tooth, you could always go on about shared values and, you know, the deep history of that special relationship. But in terms of values, there is an ocean between these two governments, isn't there? And that cannot be bridged so easily.
Well, there are different ends of the political spectrum, and they take rather different views on a number of the big issues in both foreign and domestic policy at the moment, but especially domestic policy. So yes, there is a gulf between them, but I don't think that Donald Trump is the kind to start, as it were, waffling on about values if he thinks things are different. He tends to answer the questions he's asked. So we're lucky that Starmer has struck up a better relationship than many of us expected with Trump. There's a lot of business to be done tomorrow, Matt, but I don't think that they're going to be, when they come to the press conference, going to be talking a great deal about the special relationship and shared values and all the rest. They'll talk about the substance and what they've done, I'm sure.
In 5 seconds, Kim Darroch, is the royal family the best foreign policy tool that this country has?
It's a very good, very effective soft power tool that we don't deploy it very often. There's about 2 or 3 state visits a year, but particularly with this king, who, as I say, is a very accomplished diplomat, they can do a lot. So we're lucky to have them.
Okay. Kim Darroch, Jamie Rubin, thank you very much indeed to both of you. Let's bring in our US editor, Anushka Astana, who's also made the trip across the Atlantic, although not on Air Force One, I think. Anushka, this must be the stuff of Donald Trump's dreams.
Oh, they definitely, Matt, know the way to his heart. You know, Downing Street, they've studied him really, really carefully. They know that he wants everything to be bigger and better for him. You know, he even said he thinks that Windsor Castle was a special touch just for him. Don't tell him that it's really because Buckingham Palace is having building works right now and President Macron got the same treatment. But look, as you've made clear, it's not really about the pomp. It's about the policy conversations that are happening right now behind the scenes. And we'll talk about the economic potential gains. But some of the disagreements are really important to the Americans. I mean, Donald Trump is unravelling climate policy in America. So that conversation with the king that we'll never know about could be quite awkward. On Gaza, you know, the Americans are angry about the idea that the UK is about to recognise Palestinian statehood. And a big one, free speech. Earlier I was speaking to Niall Gardner from the Heritage Foundation, very close to Donald Trump. And he said, look, to Americans, we really are special. They see the UK as special. But he says there will be some difficult conversations.
Donald Trump is a big supporter of the US-UK special relationship. He's the most pro-British US president, I think, of the modern era.
But there are some big ideological divides, especially at the moment, and the administration has been particularly critical of the UK over free speech.
Yes. I think the key issue for the US administration is the issue of individuals being arrested for what they've said on X, for example, or Facebook and social media, and that is seen as quite Orwellian, actually. And so I do think the issue may be raised in the discussions between the British Prime Minister and the US President.
Now, what critics say is that Donald Trump's reaction to the killing of political activist, his friend Charlie Kirk, to crack down on liberal groups is hypocritical. It's free speech for the right, but not for the left. But let me just talk about the positives, the potential economic gains, because some of them are real. Americans really think we're at the front of the queue for a trade deal. Car sales actually increased in July from the UK to the US because of tariff cuts. But here's the thing, sources tell me Donald Trump thinks the whole deal is done. But actually, there are tensions within his team between Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Jamieson Greer on trade. I'm told that they come with different approaches. There's real disappointment about steel, and Americans are apparently outraged that we don't want some of their meat, like chlorinated chicken. They say
outrageous.
They say that that is a high enough standard, and why is it that the UK don't want that? So look, the trade deal is underway, but there is still some way to go.
I'm sure they're not having chlorinated chicken tonight for the state banquet.
Definitely not.
We'll never know if they do. Thank you very much. Well, let's now take a closer look at the potential economic benefits of this trip for the UK, with those promises from US tech firms to invest £31 billion here in Britain. Our economics correspondent Helia Ebrahimi has been talking to the CEO of US chip giant NVIDIA about that very subject. But first, the US Federal Reserve has just announced the interest rate cut that President Trump has been so desperate for. What more can you tell us, Helia?
Well, Matt, that decision has just been taken. The Federal Reserve, after a year, has finally cut interest rates by 1/4 of a point. That's after a massive standoff between the president and the Fed. The Fed was very worried that tariffs were going to cause inflation, and he launched this assault on the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, which sparked huge anxieties about the independence of the Fed. Well, this will be seen as a massive victory for the president. And when we're talking about victories, let's turn to this week's trip and the US trade deal, because earlier today we spoke to the chief executive of NVIDIA, now the world's largest company, about what these tech deals mean, not just for Britain, but about the new industrial revolution.
Our brand new GeForce.
Meet the man who built a $4 trillion company, NVIDIA, now even bigger than Google, Microsoft, or even Apple. He's flown in with President Trump as part of an array of US-UK tech deals, and a boost for Keir Starmer, who's desperately looking for good news.
Artificial intelligence is the most impactful technology of our time. This is an important area for every country, the United States, China, the UK, and just about every other.
The Prime Minister made a pact with the NVIDIA boss in June to deploy all the government's resources to roll out a new generation of cutting-edge data centres.
Physical AI isn't just driving on roads.
Today, the government announced more than £30 billion of tech deals with US companies to bring data centres to the northeast of England, Hertfordshire and the London Docklands. So will AI rescue the UK economy?
For the next generation of robotics.
You talked a lot earlier about the Prime Minister having internalised your warning about building more infrastructure. Does the UK government get it?
Oh, absolutely. That's why we're back here again. Why?
Enough for us to be a world AI superpower?
It's enough to get launched. It's not enough for the long term. You're going to have to build, you're going to have to keep doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling every single year. And I think that you're going to be building out AI infrastructure here in UK for a decade.
For an economy that is struggling at the moment, what are the risks for the UK if we don't grasp this opportunity?
Just as the last industrial revolution, the reason why it came about was because you needed it. And so the industrial revolution that started here in the UK came out of need. You need it now too.
For ordinary Britons, is this going to make a difference?
If you're an electrician, you're a plumber, if you're a carpenter, we're going to need hundreds of thousands of them to build all of these factories. And the skilled craft segment of every economy is going to see a boom. And the reason for that is because just about every single country in the world is going to start manufacturing. They're either manufacturing physical things or they're going to manufacture intelligence. And so the manufacturing sector is going to go through a really great resurgence.
Over the next few years, estimates suggest more than twice the entire size of the UK economy will be poured into AI infrastructure as companies and countries race for AI supremacy. Britain is a relative minnow in that fight, with a real tussle between Trump's America and Xi Jinping's China. Chips have been a kind of geopolitical flashpoint. Has NVIDIA become more than a chip company, more an arm of US foreign policy?
President Trump is very clear he wants America to win. And President Xi wants China to win. And it's possible for both of them too. The advance of human society is not a zero-sum game. And so I think that for America to win the technology, to win the AI race particularly, it's important that, and President Trump sees this clearly, it's important that all AI companies, that all AI research is built on the American tech stack.
And you were talking earlier about the relationship with China being a roller coaster. Do you regret that? Is it repairable?
Just like all roller coasters, you're strapped in, enjoy yourself. And so there's only so much you could do in a roller coaster.
This week, Chinese authorities launched a crackdown on the use of NVIDIA chips by their own companies. Huang had hoped to maintain a tenuous peace between the two superpowers by agreeing to only sell basic chips to China and to hand over a portion of the revenue to the White House.
We're disappointed about where we're at, but we're patient about where we're at. NVIDIA is a large company.
Whether his new friend, the Prime Minister, can afford to be as patient waiting for the fruits of this labour is unclear. Amid the razzle-dazzle of these billion-dollar agreements, nothing has yet been said about steel tariffs or digital regulation, or the impact of this energy-hungry technology on net zero. It may well be astute economic planning, and Starmer will be desperate that he's there to see the AI revolution take off.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Culture, Media and Sports Secretary, Lisa Nandy, and I began by asking her how Keir Starmer's talks with the US President are likely to go tomorrow, given that Donald Trump loves a winner and the British Prime Minister is currently looking a bit like a loser.
Well, I think Britain is winning from the relationship that our Prime Minister has been able to forge with President Trump and his administration. Just this morning, we were able to announce billions of pounds worth of investment into the UK. We're the only country in the world that isn't paying 50% steel tariffs, which has protected thousands of jobs.
You mentioned the tariffs. I mean, even 25% steel tariffs is far more than the steel industry wants. And the government at one stage had promised to bring those down to zero. So if that's not going to happen, what is the point of the special relationship?
Well, we're keen to advance that further, and we've signalled our ambition to try to remove steel tariffs altogether. We know that the steel industry needs support and it's vital to the future of Britain. And I think we have done more than any other government to defend and protect our steel industry. I'm sure those are conversations that the Prime Minister will be having over the next few days. But we've already been able to protect many, many jobs here in Britain because of that relationship and to start to build new jobs in new industries like artificial intelligence. That's in the interests of the whole country.
Are we making British power, British water, British data available so that American companies can get even richer?
No, so part of the deal that Liz Kendall, the Science and Technology Secretary, announced this morning is about making sure that British companies can really benefit from AI systems and be at the forefront of the AI revolution. And when it comes to Britain and AI, the great strength that we have, what makes us a powerhouse around the world, is the content that we generate through our creative industries. It's one of our greatest assets. So as a government, we are absolutely determined to protect and support that so that we can make sure that people are paid fairly and responsibly for their work and that we're able to go on creating that incredible content that feeds the AI models of the future.
So a lot of those creative industries are really worried about copyright, and they fear that those tech giants in Silicon Valley will take that away from them?
We're really determined to protect it. Yesterday, we're just holding a round table with tech companies and creators to discuss the issue of copyright and how we protect people, make sure that they're fairly paid for their work so that they can continue to thrive, and to make sure that there's proper transparency so that they can see if their data is being scraped and can take enforcement action to prevent it. It's a difficult thing to get right. No country in the world has currently been able to crack this, and of course we have to move with our international allies in as far as possible because this is a global problem.
Finally, and briefly, I wonder if you can actually trust the guest, Donald Trump, because you yourself said in 2018 that he's a human rights nightmare. In January 2020, you said that you wish you could go to the state banquet so that you could, have an argument with him.
My criticism of the last government was that they seemed hell-bent on abandoning any kind of British values or principles.
No, but this is about what you said and what this government believes.
Yeah, no, Matt, that's the point that I'm making, is that abandoning principles and values in order to have a relationship that does nothing for the British people is not in Britain's interests. But by working very closely with the Trump administration and forging a good relationship, our Prime Minister has been able to do what the best Prime Ministers and presidents of whatever political persuasion have done in our past, and been able to advance those values.
Lisa and Andy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Windsor Castle, where both the media and the public are being kept well away from President Trump during his second historic state visit. His first visit was dogged by big protests and the giant Trump baby blimp. But times have changed. This time round, the protests are much smaller, and so are the blimps, as Simeon Brown reports.
Usually a midweek protest at 2 o'clock does not receive too many RSVPs. But this was the response to a president given the treatment of a king from those who still refuse to kiss the ring.
As black women, we are here to say no to Donald Trump, no to bigotry, no to racism, homophobia, and any of the other nasty things that man represents.
Why are you here today?
Why? Because the orange turd is such an awful person. Why else?
We are worried about some of the things that, and here, and like I say, the global consequences of a US administration which is anti-rights in the way it's working.
This crowd has been galvanized by a range of issues, from hate speech to US inaction against Israel over Gaza. And here there are clear differences to the anti-Trump protests of 2017, 2018 and 2019. This was the reaction to Trump's first working visit as president. 250,000 protesters took to the streets. Numbers are a fraction this term. And 7 years on, the message may be the same, but some of the messengers have changed. This was the Foreign Secretary at the Women's March in 2017, organised in solidarity against President Trump.
You have the most powerful man in the world saying that it's okay to sexually assault women if you're rich and powerful. It's not, no way.
And this was the Foreign Secretary's predecessor in 2018.
My God, this is wonderful. We have 250,000 people saying no. Say no to Donald Trump.
The politicians who condemned President Trump in his first term, who are now charming him, were missing from this march. Clearly in this country, amongst some people, there is still a strong appetite to take to the streets against the presence of Donald Trump. But in comparison to 2018 and 2019, it seems as if the coalition against Donald Trump has narrowed. Back then, you saw more celebrities, more centrist politicians taking part. But it seems for many of them, they now accept that this is Donald Trump's world, and we're just living in it.
I think it does speak to the normalization of some of Trump's values. Of course, we should have democratic relationships with presidents, including ones we disagree with. We should not be rolling out a red carpet, giving them a state visit, the pomp and ceremony. We have a Prime Minister that far too often is ready to appeal to the far right, to allow the whole centre to shift. And actually, I think the normalization of Donald Trump is part of that trend.
As the US president receives the best of British hospitality from the king, this unwelcoming committee says the establishment does not speak for them.